Monica's conscious of too, so I
Yes,
appreciate
sir.
you thinking that. Yeah.
Okay, I've got two parts here. One of the signs over here shows a transmission pipe going between two buildings, and we can't get the PG&E truck in, we can't get the fire truck in. Is there any place that is like that along the route that the pipeline goes? And I wanted to ask you another question just after that.
Okay, you want to do them all at the same
Okay,
time?
was the 4 hours in San Mateo, was there any real danger for going that long?
Yeah, in San Mateo City, that particular project, there was a danger. There was gas leaking off of the pipe. Now, remember, when we shut off a gas pipe when there's an emergency, right? It's not like flicking a switch. Okay, we have automated gas valves as well as hand valves all throughout our system, and they all go back to a 24/7 gas transmission center in San Ramon. It is state of the art. It's wonderful. If you ever want to visit, let us know, because it's pretty cool. What was going on, and so what we do when we have to shut down a pipe is we have to isolate that pipe, we have to shut down the valves around it, then we're going to have to evacuate gas, all of those kinds of things. For us to try to do that, it is a process. It takes at least an hour, if not longer. In that case, it was 4 hours. So in that case, as we are trying to shut down the pipe, in that particular instance, there was gas that we couldn't get in there to evacuate the pipe, so gas was leaking off into the sewer system. And that's not good. And that went on for about 3.5 hours, where we had people monitoring at the sewer system line, and then they were sitting there trying to dig to that tree line to safely evacuate the gas, because they couldn't just punch a hole in here or over there. It is a complex process, and so it's those kinds of things that we want to be ready for that emergency. That in specific.
You know, and that probably doesn't happen very often, I would hope. So, you know, tearing down, you know, trees because of some improbable thing is maybe not the best way to go, but at any rate, that's up to your decision there, but that math.
I could, when it comes to Graham Hill Road, I cannot be very specific in how close structures are or far apart. We're in the process of doing those assessments. There are, I know, Mr. Stewart, I have a house that has a house. Has a house just like that.
How many of them are there along that route?
There are not many.
So why not?
No, I was going to say, there's not many.
The majority of the pipeline.
Yeah.
Runs right along, near
Runs
the road.
right along the road.
Along the road.
But your question that you want me to answer is, if we have anything else besides, do we have that particular example on that board, right? That's.
Is there a transmission line running between houses within the parameters that you want to have, you know, smaller, you want to widen it to 14 feet on each side, right?
Well, that would be our ideal. In a lot of cases with private property, we try to limit it because of the manageable trees where we want to work with folks. We could have trees as close as 5 feet to the pipeline. We need 5 feet on either side to get equipment in and those kinds of issues. It also depends on what kind of equipment we need to get in there and what the actual access areas are. In a case like this, nobody's driving a car up there, right? But there is other kinds of equipment that our first responders have that we do need to get up there to keep the pipeline safe and to do the work as quickly as possible. That's the kind of access that we are looking for, and that's why we're able to work on the judgment. And yeah, ideally for us, it's 14 feet, okay? Supervisor McPherson has said, come on guys, we can work together, which we have. And that's where we're willing to work with you and work with the community and take on that risk of saying 5 feet on either side to get to a backyard like that. There are some instances throughout all of Santa Cruz County that are like that. Through Santa Cruz City in particular, that I do know about. And we're working with those private property homeowners to make sure that that situation
I
is safe.
just want to see it limited to that.
Yeah.
Lady
in
the back.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm not getting a really good feeling now about the security, you know, or the integrity of the pipeline itself. And so, like, the more I'm sitting here, the more I'm getting upset, you know, with, are the homes really safe itself from whatever fire that comes from Henry Cow Park or, you know, I mean, I'm just not getting a good feeling about this, like we're on top of the problem, you know, I mean,
Well, I can assure you, as I began when I was talking, I can assure you with your issue, you have an issue with the safety of the pipe.
Yes.
Right? That is particularly what we're
that's what you
talking
have
about.
too. That's
That's
why
what
you're
we
doing
have
it.
as well. We know right now that the pipeline is safe under the ground. We are working constantly with CAL FIRE, police, local firefighters, etc., to constantly monitor the pipe to make sure that it stays safe. That's why there's certain ways that we can share information, there's certain ways that we can work with folks. And one of the things that PG&E has that no other utility company has is called public safety supervisors. What they are people like Dane Lobb right here. Okay, Dane works for us. Dane is tasked with being in front of every single firefighter in his district at least once a year. And you know how good Dane is? He does it twice a year, because I've gone with him on a lot of them. And we're constantly talking to them and sharing information with them where the location of the pipe is, trying to make sure that we're all talking to keep everybody's neighborhood safe.
This is costing the county or whatever, whoever's paying it, this is
We're
costing
paying
a lot
for
of
it.
money.
Yes.
Why is all this focus on this road? Why is all this money and all this focus on this road? There must be
I think
more
it's better to
danger
say,
on this road than another road.
well, the focus is all over the county. The focus is on 6,750 miles of transmission pipeline. 5 years ago, we GPS inline surveyed every single inch of this pipe. We looked at every single structure that is near or over the pipe. We immediately talked to anybody that had inadvertently built over the pipe. We've been doing that over the last few years. And with our helicopter surveys and our airplane surveys, we have actually been catching people before there's a problem. As a matter of fact, was it a month ago, I was in the helicopter because I needed to see how much can you really see from a helicopter? We're 500 feet off the ground going up and down the pipe. We're flying over downtown Berkeley. Huge apartment buildings, right? And we watch a guy pull up in a backhoe, steers it off his thing and starts digging 4 feet from a transmission pipe. No USA ticket, no call 811, just, you know, call before you dig, 811. People with heavy equipment, just that day flying up and down East Bay, we saw 10 incidents of that. And we are texting people to send them out. It's 90% of our problem is people digging in, and that's part of our thinking when it comes to trying to keep a clear right-of-way so people know where they are. And that's where I say that I'm proud about what we do as a company, because when we have our gas transmission system, if somebody does dig into that pipe, we get notified before even police and fire call us because of the pressure of the pipe changes.
Thanks. I live up in Boulder Creek, so this green line is my way home.
Mhm.
And as you get exiting at the top, so is this phase one and you're going to continue up through the
No,
valley?
the pipe goes down to distribution level at the top and then goes and feeds into homes. So there's no transmission pipeline
Okay.
north of there.
So I've got a second question. You know, I've had some dead trees taken out in my yard, and typical thing is you cut off a tree at the ground and you just leave the roots there. So you
Yes.
described this 4-hour episode up in San Mateo, but I mean, is what you're going to do here, you're going to cut down a bunch of trees, but you're just going to leave those roots there because you described having to cut through roots for 4 hours.
Yes, and those are live tree roots, which are very different than tree roots that have passed away. To dig through those in an emergency, we want to make sure that we have erosion control and those kinds of things. There are a lot of different ecological issues that are a part of that. That's why we flush cut and we'll stump grind in a lot of cases. That way we can break through that in an emergency. It's live tree roots and others. It's just a different animal.
I was just wondering if someone could just trace that line and talk it up all the way up. Could you do that for 2 or 3 minutes, just to trace it so everybody here can understand?
So,
That's San Lorenzo
That's
River.
San Lorenzo River.
okay.
Okay, you know, can somebody help this man?
No, it's not helping. I'm not sure exactly the information you're
I
looking
just
for when
wanted
we
to
say.
just trace it up there and see where,
So people realize where it's going.
So
Yeah.
where it's, okay. Yeah,
So this is Graham Hill Road running right along here.
okay, and the line is where?
It's running on, in some places on the left side, in some places on the right side.
Okay. And then you mentioned Nepenthe. What's
Yes.
going on at Nepenthe?
The pipeline switches from the east side of the road
Oh,
to
that's
the
all it
west
is,
side.
okay.
Yes, sir.
So, and that's the transmission line that we're talking about?
Yes, sir.
The distribution is a little different, right?
Yes, sir.
So we're just talking
Significantly.
about transmission?
Just transmission.
Okay, got it.
Distribution, service, whole different ball of
Right.
wax.
Is a similar program going on with considering that, the distribution?
No, we monitor those constantly. It depends on if the pipe is made of steel, if it's made of plastic, those kinds of things. Our biggest risk and our greatest hope to keep as many trees as possible is to work with the transmission line.
Okay.
So it's just transmission that we're
Just
talking about.
transmission.
Okay, got it.
Right.
So
Is
the,
the safety problem more impacted by the trees or people inadvertently digging and hitting the pipeline?
Yeah, it's both. It's
Do you have
a cult
percentage on
concert.
that?
Do I have a percentage?
You know, more about
I'm
which
trying to
way
think.
is more?
Which way's more?
Yeah, is there more accidents with people inadvertently digging or
Oh.
a tree coming down?
There are, I would say that there are
You
more
just
accidents with
mentioned in
people doing
Berkeley
digging.
there were a lot of people
Yeah, there are people digging in.
inadvertently
No, yes, there are 90%
Makes
of
sense.
our issues are people digging into the pipe. And so making sure there is a clear access so that people understand that there's a pipeline there, making sure that people call 811 before they dig. There are a lot of people that say, oh, there's a bunch of trees here, there'd never be a pipeline. So we're trying to create a sense of this is where the pipeline is. So we have been installing pipeline markers that are line of sight. So as you come up on a pipeline marker, you should be able to see the next one down the way. And trying to create a sense and come in and educate folks as to what it means to live with a gas transmission line. One of the things as I started working with PG&E on this program that got me kind of worried was when we were talking to our private property customers. 60% of the folks that we talked to at one point did not know they had a gas transmission line. And then we ended up talking to the Realtor Association in San Mateo County. And some of the real estate agents said, well, I saw PG&E easement on the title. That means, you have a gas stove. So that shouldn't mean anything large or big, right? And so the amount of education that we need to do so that folks understand what a gas transmission line is, what it means to live with one, how do we make sure that that gas transmission line lives its life safely under the ground, it's up to us as PG&E to make sure that we go out and talk to folks, let them understand what the risks are, have discussions about what those risks are, and see what works for each neighborhood.
yes, ma'am.
I would like to know how old this particular pipe is, what year it was laid, and how it is maybe immune from corrosion, since corrosion is what did in the San Bruno pipe.
So San Bruno wasn't corrosion, just so you know.
It wasn't?
It was not. It was a seam weld.
Oh.
Okay, so I just want to be very
No,
clear,
that's
right?
good, okay.
The corrosion issues that we have on gas transmission pipe is it's made of steel, right? Distribution and service can be made of plastic. It's a much different thing. And we have high pressure gas in it, 60 PSI or higher. So what that means when you squeeze gas, I don't know if y'all remember, it gets cold, right? And there's pressure. Well, that cold does get condensation on the pipe, and so that has consequences. We have cathodic protection that we put on that pipe. That cathodic protection keeps the pipeline from corroding, okay? And there are parts, you go down to our pipe and you scrape off some of the cathodic protection, it'll look brand new like when it was put in the 30s, okay? And that's when we're talking about some of the times this pipe was put in, but it's been updated since, but around the 30s is when it started here. And you'll see that, the cathodic protection works. Where our risk comes in is if you have a tree directly over the pipeline and it gets and it starts growing tree roots that get attracted to that water, and the soil's a little bit looser around pipelines, you could have some corrosion on that pipe. And that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we get a message out today when we talk about unacceptable trees and manageable trees. We want to make sure that as many trees can stay as possible. Manageable trees, when you look at our tree by tree review criteria, what you will not find here is age of tree. Because whatever tree is over the pipe, we want it to live a long, happy, healthy life. If it has a lifetime of 1,000,000 years, that's fine. We know that we can manage it around the pipeline. And we're going to come back year after year to check on that tree. And everybody needs to know that. When I say you're going to see a lot more of us, you're going to see a lot more of us. Okay? We're going to come back and check those trees. Okay? Now, what we do is we look at all that, and we look at all of these factors working in concert. So I can't tell you that first responder access is the #1 thing, or tree root interaction is the other. But I can tell you that when those two things work in concert, when you have to access the pipe and you have the tree root issue, that's where we start to figure out what works for our integrity management system, and we save as many trees as possible. Now let's say we've got an unacceptable tree over the pipe and 5 or 6 manageable trees on either side. And I'll come here, and I've had this conversation with the supervisor before and with Public Works here in the county. If that one tree that's directly over the pipe has a high chance of hitting the cathodic protection and starting corrosion on that pipe, if that corrosion starts, I'm going to have to go in and replace that pipe. When I replace that pipe to make sure that it's safe, I'm taking 40 or 50 feet of that pipe, which means the 5 manageable trees that the supervisor has asked us to save, they don't get saved anymore. And so we feel by having these targeted replacements and working with you on mitigation that works for the whole community, that we can figure this out. Keep the pipeline safe, keep as many trees as possible, and not change the nature of your neighborhood overnight.
2 questions.
Sure.
First one is, we hear different things, so maybe you could clarify. Will PG&E be going through any form, because this is a lot of trees are affected. It would seem it's like a project under CEQA. Will you be going through any California Environmental Quality Act environmental review for this
Yeah,
project?
we do an environmental review ourselves to begin with, okay? And that's where we find out what is it, where are the places that we have to go through CEQA, where are the coastal zone permits, so we do a review that's riparian habitat, cultural, all of those things. We will come into those issues if we're around creek crossings, which I think I pointed to one, right? We'll have to get 1,600 permits with Cal Fish and Wildlife, which is also a CEQA process. So we go through and we figure out what all the work is. And that's what's important when we talk about a couple hundred of trees being removed. If the county had said to us, take all the manageables and all the unacceptables, that's a much different environmental question to answer. And as we have been talking to the county, which we have since January, we realize that we're getting down to these unacceptable trees, a couple of hundred trees that we can now figure out the mitigation, we can figure out the environmental impacts, and we can put this plan together and do this over the next year.
I guess that's, no. There's a
Right.
difference between getting a permit from whatever department and doing a CEQA review, like a mitigated negative declaration or an environmental.
Yes.
Will you be doing any of that sort of environmental review, or is it more just like we need a permit for this creek and we need, will it be a full CEQA review?
I mean, Dustin, how do you want me to?
And then I do have one more question after that. Thank you.
CEQA is kind of it's a complicated subject to kind of talk about, but CEQA is triggered when there's a discretionary action. So CEQA is triggered by a discretionary action. So Darren's 100% correct. So when we need a state level permit, like coastal zone permitting, or a 1,600 permit from Cal Fish and Wildlife, that's when that particular project would go through a CEQA review. PG&E is not a lead agency, so we can't go through CEQA on our own. We need a state agency that has a discretionary action over our project to make us, or to have us go through that compliance process. But that being said, we do an internal review of all of our projects. So a biologist does a desktop review. We go out in the field, we verify those results. Darren talked about a cultural resources specialist that does review of records to make sure we're not dealing with any historical resources, and we do air, water, and hazmat assessments. So even though there's not a standard typical, you know, mitigated negative deck like you were talking about, we do an internal review to make sure we're in compliance with all.
Is that public information?
I can share specific information if you have a project or a property that you want to know about. If it's
No,
your property.
no, the whole,
We
all
can
the
start, we
trees.
can start sharing that as,
Okay.
PG&E, is that correct?
Excuse me?
All these people you just talked about that do these reports are all paid by PG&E to
So
do
we have,
that
we have
report
internal
for you?
staff, we also have contractors that help us with the work.
But they're all paid by PG&E?
Yes, we were paying for them to do the reviews, like, just like city or county would have help with contractors.
Right, but
So-
instead of being a state agency or independent agency, of course, if you're paying their bill, their interest may be a little skewed.
no, and I get what you're saying when it comes to those kinds of issues, that, you know, is there this third-party validator? The third-party validator is CPUC. They're our discretionary authority. So when we go through these and we show the environmental thing, CPUC is the lead agency for us. A lot of,
Environmental agency.
No.
So we're no different than any other developer that